Welcome everyone to our Community of Learning series titled Strengthening Wellness in Indigenous Communities Using the Medicine Wheel. We are absolutely thrilled to see you all here today as we embark on the second leg of our enlightening journey, integrated healthcare through an Indigenous approach. As we dive into the heart of this series, today's session is dedicated to the exploration of the pivotal role of culturally relevant design in fostering trust and inclusivity within integrated healthcare for adults and elders. Throughout this webinar, you'll discover a wealth of insights in various key areas, which we will explore with you shortly. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speakers from Denver Indian Health and Family Services, Daryl Conquering Bear, Rosalind Small Farley, and Sarah Maez. Their wealth of experience and wisdom promises to enrich our understanding and discussions today. Before we get started, allow me to introduce the exceptional team supporting us from NCUIH and address some essential housekeeping matters. My name is Liz Best, and I'm a Program Manager of Technical Assistance in the Technical Assistance Research Center, known as TARP. Joining me from the NCUIH team are Molly Siegel and Jessica Gilbertson. We are honored to have you all here today, and we kindly ask that you place your name, your organization, your tribal affiliation, and title into the chat box. In addition, we welcome any feedback you would like to provide about your webinar experience in our survey, which Molly will also post in our chat box. Next slide, please. For those of you that are unfamiliar with NCUIH, here's a little background. The National Council of Urban Indian Health, also known as NCUIH, is the national nonprofit organization devoted to the support and development of quality, accessible, and culturally competent health and public health services for American Indian and Alaska Natives living in urban areas. NCUIH is the only national representative of the 41 Title V Urban Indian Organizations, or UIOs, under the Indian Health Service and the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act. NCUIH strives to improve the health of over 70% of the American Indian Alaska Native population that lives in urban areas, supported by quality, accessible healthcare centers. Next slide, please. This event is made possible by the Indian Health Services, and this event is solely the responsibility of the National Council of Urban Indian Health and does not necessarily represent the views of Indian Health Services or the Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. Before we proceed, please note that this session will be recorded for educational and quality improvement purposes. We will be sending out the recording and the slide deck sometime early next week. The recording will also be shared at a later date. Next slide, please. Please note that your mics have been muted upon entry, and we always encourage participation and engagement. We invite all the participants to turn on your camera, post questions and comments in the chat box, and there will be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. As we continue our webinar, we encourage active participation and value your questions and insights. To make the most of this interactive experience, here is how you can ask a question on Zoom. Just click the chat icon below and type your question and enter to send it to the group. Next slide, please. In addition to using the regular Zoom functions for this webinar, we will also be using the Zoom whiteboard. Today's speakers will be asking the audience questions via a whiteboard where participants can type their answers using sticky notes found on the left-hand side of the screen. Our communications team will bring up the whiteboard when the questions are asked. Next slide, please. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce our guest speakers for this session. Joining us are Daryl Conquering Bear Crow. He is an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux Nation located in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Daryl attended Oregon State University, where he pursued a degree in human sports and development with an emphasis in youth development and coaching. Daryl coached high school basketball, and to date, Daryl has helped over 45 Native youth receive college basketball scholarships to compete at the next level. As the Native Wellness Coordinator, Daryl has inspired many to bead as a healthy coping skill and learn about the history of cultural medicines. A fun fact about Daryl is that he was named by President Obama as a champion of change and has interned for several U.S. senators. Also joining us is Rosie Small. She identifies as Tene and has been part of the urban Native population of Denver throughout her life. She received her master's in mental health counseling at Adams State University and has been working in the field of trauma and substance abuse treatment upon graduation in 2019. She currently works as a behavioral health therapist at Denver Indian Health and Family Services, focusing on PTSD trauma, substance abuse, and EMDR. She has provided webinars and cultural humility courses addressing Native American history and treatment considerations of working with Native American populations with different agencies around the Denver area. She is also involved in victim advocacy and currently works under a grant that offers mental health services for Indigenous people who may have experienced different forms of trauma through their lifetime, such as physical, emotional, intellectual, and sexual abuse or sexual assault, neglect, abandonment, and domestic violence. She has her LAC, but is continuing to work on her LPC and the COVID Immediate Advocate and Domestic Violence Treatment Advocate certification. And lastly, we're thrilled to have Sarah join us. She was born and raised in Denver, and she graduated with her undergraduate degree in exercise science with an emphasis in adult fitness from Metropolitan State University of Denver. Ms. Sarah hoped to help underserved populations manage their health and wellness through exercise. She began working at Denver Indian Health and Family Services almost 5 years ago to help her connect more with her Native heritage. Her passion is diabetes self-management, education, and facilitating cultural workshops. She and her team helped build a diabetes education curriculum focused around promoting culturally specific, traditional, and contemporary physical activity and nutrition for Natives. She is a certified healthy lifestyle coach and the director of the Health and Wellness Program at Denver Indian Health and Family Services. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic over.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for those introductions. Thank you for the welcome. So before we get started, we want to first honor and acknowledge that we are presenting from the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. We acknowledge that teachings vary from tribe to tribe. Next slide, please. So a little bit about us. I wanted to go over our vision statement and things like that so you can learn about Denver Indian Health and Family Services. So first off, our vision statement. We envision health and wellness for all our relations in the Denver area with access to healthcare grounded in Indigenous culture and excellence. Mission statement, to provide culturally competent services that promote quality of health for American Indian and Alaskan Native families and individuals in the Denver area. Value statement, Denver Indian Health and Family Services is anchored by the values of trust. We are transparent and deliver our services with integrity. Respect, our care is compassionate and honors our relatives. Culture, we value traditional Indigenous ways and recognize their importance to health and well-being. Community-driven, our services are inclusive and respond to the needs of our community. Next slide, please. Some of our objectives today are going to be gain a basic understanding of the Indigenous medicine wheel, understand the importance of culturally relevant design, for building trust and inclusivity in integrated healthcare design for adults and elders, learn promising practices for embracing inclusive principles in integrated healthcare design. Next slide, please. So medicine wheel teachings. Each tribal nation and clan's interpretation is unique, but universally speaking, it is specific to Indigenous cultural needs, health, and well-being. Each interpretation has the ultimate goal of overall positive health and well-being, and each cardinal direction offers different teachings with the objective to stay balanced at the center of the wheel. We encourage you to discuss this with your elders and learn how each direction is interpreted for that healthy lifestyle. So our first question we want to pose, how do you engage with elders in your work and in your settings? And I believe the whiteboard is coming up to be able to ask that, so give us just a moment. Oh, we adjusted one. So we can go ahead and go right into this question. This one is, how is your clinic like the medicine wheel? So feel free to utilize the whiteboard and fill in some of those questions. So I think we're getting some responses in there, and yeah, perfect. I love it when we get to see folks typing in on the whiteboard. And on Nikki's end, we can skip to the next slide, but we can stay on here while folks can go ahead and answer this question. But I want to touch just a little bit on how our clinic is like a medicine wheel. So generally speaking, our clinic is like a medicine wheel. We often find every department we have can touch and intersect with each area of this medicine wheel, including the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspect, depending on the day and depending on the individual patient we are serving. So for example, our medical department offers a room where patients can go to utilize traditional medicines for smudging and prayer before or after meeting with a provider. Our pharmacy talks about traditional medicines and provides a space in our pharmacy for those traditional medicines. And our wellness department teaches workshops on traditional physical activity, nutrition, and different cultural classes. Our dental department not only focuses on teeth and gums, but talks about how all areas of our health, from one's heart to their diabetes management, plays a vital role in part in their oral health and their overall health. And our behavioral health team infuses cultural teachings into their work, which Rosie will cover in the coming slides. I want to go ahead and read some answers we have from you all answering that question of how is your clinic and your work like the medicine wheel? So one, I see supporting mind, body, health teachings, offering integrative care for all, including medical, behavioral health, and cultural health. I love that. I see another one. We are a certified healthcare home, which integrates a more holistic view of life that centers around the needs and important cultural aspects of each patient. Engage with my elders in my community during family gatherings and ceremonies. That's probably one of our favorite things for all of our presenters today. Working with the members of the community, from elders to kids, meeting them where they are at, is definitely very huge to understand that and be able to support folks. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for those responses. We really appreciate that. And yeah, feel free to continue typing out there as well. Perfect. We'll get our next slide up in just a moment. Excellent. And you can go next slide. And as I had touched on before, here's our medicine wheel and how our different departments throughout our clinic fall into those aspects of physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional, and how we're able to intersect in all of those depending on the patient and depending on the day, really. So thank you for reflecting on how your clinic and your work is like a medicine wheel. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rosie.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and thanks for joining and greetings to everyone. I think this would be a good time to get into the importance of educating and acknowledging the Native population's risk factors and struggles. I think that considering cultural humility or sensitivity is important for non-Native identified staff. First, we will take a look at identity. Oh, we can go into the next slide, actually. Thank you. There we go. I'm visual too, so I like to follow along. But anyways, first we like to look at identity. You know, we've noticed how different generations and also sexual identity may cause issues within family, community, and self. For example, if we identify ourselves certain ways, it can lead into feeling non-acceptance within families or communities. It can lead into isolation and and then into feeling shame, or even being Indigenous, can be a sense of shame as well, especially in the generations older, like around the 60 age range. Secondly, we have MMIWR. We may have lost our loved ones from murder, and oftentimes legal systems are unsupportive. The case does not get solved, or even their loved ones may not return home from, for their proper burial. Boarding school experiences have a gruesome and violent history and may impact Indigenous people firsthand, or secondarily, the trauma and violence learned from these institutions can be carried on throughout families and generations. In addition to many experiencing boarding schools abuse, there was the separation of the family, the children, and then all that, the separation to their cultures. There are different forms of trauma that may occur as domestic violence, addiction, and sexual abuse that impact our well-being, families, and connections to our cultures. There are differences between reservation life and urban lifestyles. For example, the concept of time may be different on reservation than urban time. And then also communication styles, or even poverty, impacts lots of families, and the difference from urban and reservation lifestyle. Then finally, health has been impacted throughout the years. For example, in the 1970s, physicians sterilized perhaps 25% of Native American women of childbearing age without their knowledge or consent. So there's a little bit of distress right there. Sometimes we've taught as a family unit, when compared to all other U.S. races, American Indians, Alaska Natives have a lower life expectancy by 5.5 years. This includes higher rates of death from chronic illness, including diabetes, chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, and suicide. All right, so I know I covered a lot of heavy topics just now, and in a nutshell, but go ahead and take some time to focus on taking, some deep breaths, breathing in, expanding our chest, and then exhaling out, where our chest goes back to the spine, or back by the wall. Notice all that tension in your body, and then go ahead and exhale. When you exhale, breathe them all out. Take this time to maybe even see what's in front of you, something that is positive and calming. All right. Yeah. So given all these topics we touched on, how do you infuse cultural sensitivity into your work? And this would be on the whiteboard. There we go, and then we'll go to maybe we can continue on, or the question was, given all these topics we touched on, how do you infuse cultural sensitivity into your work? Yeah, I love this too. I like seeing what everyone responds with. We get all kinds of perspectives. Oh, we're getting fancy with some arrows. All right, so some things I'm reading right now, we got active listening, yeah, and getting to know the community we work with. So yeah, that's great. Spirituality and prayer, respecting the energy we naturally bring with us, knowing it can negatively affect others. Oh, it got moved. Let's see. Providing engagement groups where people with similar situations can get together to speak about their life and listening to active solutions. Okay. All right. So we got honor and respect all people. Awesome. These are good answers. Yes. All right. Thank you. We'll go ahead and continue and go into our next slide here. All right. So the next, there we go. Very nice. All right, thank you. So as a clinic, we notice how native or indigenous populations are impacted by so many barriers, risks, and struggles, current and in the past, that we try to work together, collaborate, and discuss among all the departments to address these issues and create a balanced, safe space, and helpful environment. Here's one of the many examples as we try to infuse culture into our practices. For example, in social work or mental health counseling, we're taught about the wellness wheel and how creating a balance within these different regions, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, can make us feel better or good about ourselves. And, this just goes back to the knowledge of the traditional medicine wheel with all the similar topics. Some things might be added, like professional health or, personal and things. This one is one of the worksheets we created to provide for homework or knowledge about healthy coping or self-care skills. Some examples on here, spending time in nature, spending time with your pet, such as cats, dogs, maybe even horses and sheep, and then smudging. Yeah, next slide. As an integrated care approach, we work hard on being connected with each department. I run the Returning to the Circle group, which is a relapse prevention-based group similar to the curriculum for the state for substance abuse treatment, but also incorporates cultural aspects of sobriety recovery and skills and practice of maintaining sobriety. We get referrals from the county ICWA courts, who oftentimes recommend substance abuse treatment, as well as get referrals from our clinic itself, primary care, dental, pharmacy, and health and wellness of patients who need the support or would like to work on sobriety. During this time in the curriculum, we acknowledge and identify what it means to be sober in recovery and how this impacts our different regions. On the outside of the patient, in the shaded area, you see how they identified how substance or alcohol use impacts each of the regions and stuff like that. We do emphasize how the medicine wheel may differ with individual tribes, but we reach an agreement on the order and the colors of the wheel. So it might be slightly different, but we, again, like how one of you guys said, we meet them where they're at. All right, next slide. And then we like to, this has been brought to some teachings as well. This is a slide again illustrating how the balance of mind, body, and spirit and context has helped our clinic as well as NCUIH. The relational worldview model was developed by the National Indian Child Welfare Association in the 1980s. I believe another one too was Terry Cross, and this continues to be refined and practiced by NCUIH staff. It is a reflection of the native thought process and concept of balance as a basis of health, whether this is an individual, family, or an organization. The relational worldview model serves as NCUIH's philosophy and approach to providing technical assistance. It is used by NCUIH's community development specialists as a framework and process for assessing the technical assistance needs of a community and applying it to a specific technical assistance plan. But yeah, it's just overall showing again these different regions here and creating that balance. All right, next slide. Yay, so here are some examples of utilizing the Indigenous approach to integrated care. Being connected with the clinic as a whole has been crucial because we offer services and support under one roof. As an integrated care approach, we work hard on being connected with each department. For example, we get referrals from ICWA Court or from our providers wanting to join the group, returning to the circle group, and to work on sobriety recovery. We cover that. In addition, it goes another way. We get referrals from pharmacy, but then we also refer if we think that our patients need additional support too, we make referrals to our departments as well. But pharmacy offers Vivitrol injection services. And so it's all reciprocated, things like that. The other group listed on the slide is Your Body is Medicine group, which is a cognitive behavioral mindfulness skill-based group that offers coping skill knowledge and practice of them that will help them through mental health struggles. So we may have patients, going through ongoing or new diagnoses, chronic pain and changes in lifestyle and their physical health, or not having the space and time to address, certain issues we mentioned earlier. But we like to get connected with everyone on the issues of mental health so that we can help our patients address and improve their mental and emotional health regions of the medicine wheel. Yeah, so here we go. I'll pass it on to Daryl to elaborate on how other areas of our culture utilizes Indigenous practices in the integrated care system setting.
Next slide. Thank you, Rosie, for highlighting some of those awesome cultural programmings within behavioral health and the clinic. When talking about cultural relevant design and integrated care settings, we have to empower reclaiming our health narrative. Native people are a healthy people. They've always have been. How do we help our patients take ownership of this? We help our patients reclaim their health with cultural workshops and events that help move the mind, body, and spirit. We've had workshops on nutrition, eating on a budget, reading food labels, workshops surrounding spirituality part of the medicine wheel, how to set up a teepee, how to smudge, making of a hand drum and painting, talking about our 4 traditional medicines that we now have available in the clinic, Indigenous coping skills with beading. Physically, we've held family fun walks, Rock Your Mox 5K run, 1 mile walk, cook with us, diabetes education classes for the whole family. Next slide. We've developed several tools, including 10 Indigenous ways to get moving as part of the diabetes education curriculum. We talk about Powwow Sweat, which is an amazing program brought to you by the Coeur d'Alene Indian Tribe Wellness Center in Idaho. They have amazing videos on YouTube where they use traditional dance to help improve overall health. We utilize The River Runs Through Us 90-day journal for wellness, a great tool from the Indian Health Service, and much more. Next slide. When talking about reclaiming our health as Native Indigenous people, we also recognize the Commodities Food Program and how it removed the foods from our ancestors, what our ancestors ate, and increased our health risks. This is why it's so important to talk about the traditional foods that our ancestors ate and bringing our food culture back to our plates. We utilize My Native Plate and give out the resources Indian Health Service created for Indian country. Many of our patients utilize this visual resource and talk about it when meeting with our registered dietitian. This can help us not only eat our traditional foods our ancestors ate, but also give us healthy, nutritious foods that lower our disease risks. Next slide. Some additional classes we have begun offering to get our patients in the door include our Beading with Elders, where we focus on Indigenous beading skills. It's also created a space for younger generations to learn from our elders. This class has allowed some of our community members to get in the door, and for that, trust is being built. Building trust. Give us 1 second. Building trust is something that is vital to our community members. When we build trust with our community members come back to us. When we tie in their culture, we begin to build that trust. As we can see with our diabetes class, we have utilized the clinical aspect as well as some of our traditional practices. We have seen a lot of success when keeping our patients coming back for additional services. Every morning, our clinic has a morning huddle where we review patients who are coming in for the day. Each department has the opportunity to touch base with the patient so they can have well-rounded care. They have the chance to meet with wellness, behavioral health, pharmacy, medical enrollment, dental, and more. This further helps build the trust patients to connect with all areas of their care team. This also helps reduce barriers to care. Sometimes it is simple as sitting next to the patient, connecting with them at eye level, sharing some of our personal stories when appropriate. We are relatable. We continue to show up. We know if we have one person in their help one person in their health journey, we are making an impact. We go to every outreach event we can. We have conversations. They see that we live in our culture in this clinical setting. So a question that we have is, what does building trust look like in your work? And how do you build that trust? So we're going to go ahead and go to the whiteboard where you can answer those. We'll take a moment to reflect on that question again. How does building trust look like in your work? And how do you build that trust? We got patience, active listening, be willing to forgive, that's a great one. Patience, active listening, be willing to forgive. Know that negativity isn't you. It is other factors in their life beyond your control. And just be present to help them. It's great, great example. Awesome. Well, all these questions that we're posing will be able to answer in a Q&A. And so keep thinking about those answers and taking that back to your work setting. And thank you for your listening. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sarah.
All right, thank you, Daryl. One of my favorite things that we've been able to witness in building some of that trust, as you mentioned before, about our Indigenous coping skills with the beating. So having some of those folks who may have had some hesitation in coming back into healthcare clinics are now able to see something that is familiar or learn something that maybe they weren't able to learn, and they were able to get them in the door in that way. And so they felt more comfortable in coming in, and then all of a sudden, through building that trust, we're able to get them connected with some other services they may have needed that they weren't comfortable or able to utilize yet. So that's one amazing way. Another way, something as simple as even offering our smudging, and I know in a healthcare clinic we also worry about the fire alarms going off. So being able to utilize kind of this mist spray smudge has also been huge as well. So many little ways that we can continue to build that trust is huge for our patients and huge for us as well. Next slide, please. So I also want to touch base on some, and you can go ahead and skip over one more slide. There we go, thank you. So some promising practices include, some promising practices for embracing inclusive principles in healthcare design include listening, sharing, and collaborating. So listening to the community, implementing what they deem as their needs into your practice, utilizing focus groups, community assessment surveys, listening sessions, interviews. We've gotten lots of great feedback just from interviews where folks can be candid with their responses, and we can really learn and grow from there. Also, share ideas. We don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Speak with your elders on what is appropriate to share. Share with your community, share with other UIOs, and always, always, always collaborate. Collaboration is one of my favorite things. So we're very grateful for those responses on the whiteboard because we can all learn from each other, which we really appreciate, and how we can implement that into our own practices here. Next slide, please. So like I said, with collaboration, some of my favorite projects and things like that we've been able to implement came from collaboration, like bringing the traditional game of shinny to our elders. A fun story is we actually had a NCUIH team member come and visit us for a site visit. We were able to spend some time with their amazing team. And one of the questions we were asked, was how do we provide some of our programming to our elders? And previously, in terms of our workshops, we're specifically talking about fitness in this case. And previously, we had been focused on contemporary, kind of senior fitness style workouts for our elders. And when they asked us that question, Daryl and I looked at each other and we thought, oh, how can we make this more specific? How can we take this game and how can we make it fun and for our elders? So within 1 week of getting asked that question, we adapted shinny, which is a modified version that we play already, but we adapted a little bit more so it could be played in a seated position. And I will tell you, it has been very fun to see some of our elders get competitive, as you can see in this photo. But really, they loved it. And folks who thought that they couldn't play a game because of mobility issues, all of a sudden they're laughing and they're, scoring all kinds of points on Daryl. Another beautiful project that came out of collaboration is our traditional medicine bundles. So this idea originated from our How to Smudge workshop, and then through different community members talking, we were pointed in the direction of the Butte Native Wellness Center and the team they have there. And we learned about the amazing work that Taryn, Leah, and Tina Randall are doing over there with their traditional medicines. So since we started our traditional medicine bundles in our pharmacy about a month ago, we've provided over 210 traditional medicine bundles, which consist of sage, cedar, tobacco, and sweetgrass to our elders and our community members. So we love collaboration, being able to talk and share openly with each other and learn from everyone. So some additional questions I want to ask. What projects have you collaborated on with other UIOs or tribes? If we can go to the whiteboard. You have to love technology and its ability to be able to do things like this where folks can type in their responses. So again, the question was, what projects have you collaborated on with other UIOs or tribes? What are your favorite projects? And if anyone wants to learn more about shinny, we can always share that information with you as well. It's like a cross between stickball and lacrosse, and kind of like field hockey. So our version, we play it with pool noodles, because if you get hit with a lacrosse stick or a field hockey stick, it hurts a little bit more than just playing with the pool noodle. We also play with beach balls as well, but it's been a lot of fun to be able to implement that for our community members. So again, that question was, what projects have you collaborated on with other UIOs or tribes? That might be a lot to type out. So you can also think about some, major lessons learned when implementing some of your projects. Some of our biggest lessons learned, I think, so far, making sure that we're doing things that are weather appropriate in the shade when it's too hot, making sure we're utilizing our different partnerships that we have with other organizations. I think we have the Denver Indian Center here, so we get to go over there and use their gym. Lots of different lessons learned, and positive ones too. How can we always improve that? And we get a lot of great feedback from our surveys. So after every event that we do, as there will be a survey today, and I'm sure you all are used to doing surveys, but taking what those community members are providing to us in those surveys, reading them and then implementing them from there on. All right, and we can go ahead and go over to the next slide. And before we switch over to that last slide, sorry, of course, now I'm turning it back on you. That graphic we can share as well. That's just the picture from what comes in our traditional medicine bundle, which is the sage, the cedar, the sweetgrass, and tobacco. And this is in partnership with our pharmacy team. So I just always like to touch base on that. And then now we can go to that last slide. And in this last slide, we have all of our contact information here for you if you would like to reach out to us, or if you would like us to share some resources, or if you would like to set up any meetings with us as well. We're always happy to discuss different ideas and that sort of thing. So there's our contact information. We really want to thank all of you for participating thus far. We look forward to hearing more from you in our Q&A sections, and we really want to thank NCUIH for inviting us to this space. Next slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Daryl, Rosie, and Sarah. I would definitely take them up on their offer to learn more about the game of shinny. I was part of the group that played, and it was a great workout, and it was a lot of fun. We all had a lot of smiles on our face. So thanks for sharing that with us. So if everyone could please place a clap emoji in the chat to show your appreciation, that would be wonderful. And we'd like to transition to our Q&A. Feel free to drop a question in the chat or take yourself off mute. Thanks. Yeah, so we have one question. Somebody would like more information on games for elders. Would it be best for them to reach out to you? Or you could share some information with us at NCUIH, and when we send the slides out, we could share that along.
Yes, definitely. So of course, when you're in this, you think like, oh, okay, what can we give you to share with everyone? And then we don't think about it until we're all the way right here. So yeah, we definitely have a handout on the game Shinny, how we've adapted it. And we can always share those with NCUIH to go ahead and share with everybody else. And I think once you start implementing that game, you're going to love it and you're going to want to do it at all your workshops. It's been great so far. So thank you for that.
Great. I have a question here. I think it's asking a little bit about who do you go to in your community for guidance when implementing new projects or programs, and how do you, work with your community in that way?
Thank you. That's a great question. So we utilize our different community assessment surveys. So we disseminate those oftentimes at the beginning of projects and end of projects as well. So we get a lot of feedback that way. And that's really a good time where people can, fill those out and let us know what areas they would like us to see, what they would like to see more of us doing. And then also we really try to work closely with our elders and kind of get a feedback of what their needs are and what is the best way for us to implement that, and to be respectful of, the different things that we can share and that sort of thing. So I would say that from our community members themselves through those community assessment surveys, patient interviews, interviews as well, those are probably our biggest. And then I would add having a great evaluation team to kind of help us, kind of organize all of that has been wonderful also. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think that's pretty much it. This is Rosie. With even from the groups of the relapse prevention group and also the mindfulness group, it seems like we kind of look at the themes that occur during that time. So maybe like a grief and loss group or like other groups like that, I feel like would be really helpful. But it's just the time and our staff and scheduling and things. We wear lots of hats around here, but it's there. We come with ideas, and we also get in touch with who we work with a lot. I feel like to get our knowledge as well. They've gone through a lot of things, especially with like grief and loss my caseload, for example, and that would be really cool to implement or create something with that. So we're in the talks of that. It's just a gathering and talking with our elders. I kind of see it that more with behavioral health. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Well, I've got a question for the group, since we are a large group and very diverse, representing a lot of different areas. So does anybody else want to share any successful practices that you might be implementing to enhance patients' wellness journeys using traditional ways? I know Denver shared a lot of really, really great ideas, but might be interesting to hear what others are doing as well. You type it in the chat too. Well, another question that just came in, how do you make sure you're being respectful of the unique tribal cultures of different tribes that might be represented within your clinic?
Hi, this is Daryl. So one prime example we had was our meeting with elders. All our elders came together, and I had in the room over 10 tribal members of different tribes. We started talking about how was the COVID skill, and they all decided to have conversations about their experience and where their tribal came from. From that, we know food connects us. And so they talked about different foods, and they talked about how this coming together for program was essential. And so at that moment, they were having conversations on how to respect each other, how to build the trust and confidence of having deep conversations of a boarding school era, grief, death. And so naturally it took place of just providing a space for them and being able to, as a younger person, sit back and listen to those stories. And with that, they have formed group norms and rules without having me to facilitate that conversation. And so having a space, being able to provide that time for them to have that conversation. But I think we do it naturally here, that we don't have to be able to set those rules in place. And so listening to our elders and creating that space. And so from there, our last cohort was meeting with elders. And so we had a younger generations come in, and they were able to have those conversations and set those boundaries so that they're passing that torch on to the younger generation. And so just respecting, having a conversation, and just listening to one another, like they did one elder said, like they used to do back in council back in the days. We sat down and just talked for hours. And so it was pretty unique to see that.
And I'll add on to that just a little bit as well. And so, we're fortunate to be able to serve such a diverse group here in our clinic. And so we also utilize different content experts from the community as well. So if we're doing something specific like Navajo string games, we'll consult with somebody who that is they're an expert in that content. And so being able to utilize our community members to kind of fill the gaps of things that we might not necessarily understand or have all of the answers to, so they can teach it from their tribe's perspective.
I got another one too. Yeah, I would probably look at the region you're working at, because obviously there's lots of tribes, 200 plus recognized tribes. And so focusing on who you're working with around there. So like, so here we get a lot of people from Lakota, Pine Ridge, Rosebud, South Dakota to Wyoming, Northern Cheyenne, Arapaho, Kiowa even, and then we also got some Seminole coming out up here too. But it's really helpful to know what that region is like. Navajos, Four Corners area, we're kind of just really central for all four directions there. But but yeah, I think immersing yourself in the culture that's here. So there's powwows, there's other activities. I feel like at the Denver Indian Center, DIHFS, or healing circles and things like that. It's kind of like rural population when you get into it. We might know somebody, or we might know. It's very small, so as a counselor, we respect that confidentiality, of course, but that we can go to those people to help us out with these sort of programs and stuff. Me personally, I'm part of the powwow circuit, and I've been going to places where my patients have been, because sometimes I see a lot of disconnect that they went to foster care a lot, but I've often gone back to see what their homelands would look like. And then again, at your own. But I like to know about that. So I visited Crow Agency, Lame Deer, even my own tribe, Navajo Reservation, just to get that culture, to get to see what it's like over there and stuff like that myself. Even it goes back to like ICWA courts. They've taken a long road trip to the different reservations that they worked common with. They said it was a good trip. I don't know about that one, but I've heard of it. But that's how they got immersed in their population that they work with and stuff. But same here. I like to go and see what the culture's about and stuff. So that's another way. That's another one too. Okay.
Great, and I think we have time for one more question. The question just came in. I'm looking for ideas on how to address personal hygiene as a whole. We have a high rate of certain infections, and I'm being told it's not acceptable to speak or attempt to instruct patients on how to, for example, collect a clean urine sample or the need for STD testing. How do I approach this, and what would help with integrating education in a respectful and appropriate manner for these more personal or sensitive topics?
I would, for me, so we wear lots of hats, and that's one way I feel like that's really helpful is that creating that information worksheet, but adding culturally relevant pictures or symbols. I feel like so like that's a more medical. Maybe we can tag team with medical now. But me and my BH team, behavioral health team, we make these worksheets that have culturally like symbols, buffalo, baskets, teepees, and knowledge about like depression, anxiety, or trauma, or healthy coping skills and stuff like that. I feel like, maybe that can be a way to educate them. And I agree, there's that knowledge that it's giving a hair follicle, for example, is kind of not tradition, or like the urine sample they were saying and stuff. But it kind of, I like how people were adding in the patients, or it's just with counseling, it's motivational interviewing. You're not really directing them, but you definitely have to be direct and saying, hey, please, this is for health, the physical health region, and this is information about it. You're just, again, planting seeds. But again, that's behavioral health for me. Medical team would definitely be a good, that'll be a good question to ask too, but I don't know if you have any.
I'll just add on to that of just having that cultural sensitivity and understanding, what some of those practices are in that terms, and it's all in how you're able to deliver that as well. Being able to have conversations instead of saying, just directly, this is the way that you should do it, and trying to understand in those different forms that it's coming in. And so, yeah, just kind of bringing yourself and having that conversation, that side to side conversation, and understanding a little bit more and talking to those patients.
Great, thank you. And that'll wrap up our Q&A. So thank you to everyone who helped share with some questions, and thank you to Denver Indian Health and Family Services for answering those questions. So we'll continue with the next slide, please. So Molly is going to drop the QR code for the survey and also the link. We generally appreciate your time and effort to help us shape future events. And you can do so by taking a few minutes to fill out this brief survey. It will only take a few minutes. We will also share this link around next week when we share the slides and the recording. And next slide, please. NCUIH has some upcoming events over the next month. I can't believe it's almost November. But next week we are hosting a webinar, Integrated Healthcare Through an Indigenous Approach, or that was today. In November 9th, we are hosting a vaccine equity webinar, Paths to Vaccine Equity. November 15th, we have MMIP consent training. And then rounding out the month on November 30th, we are hosting a behavioral health, the third session of this series, Culturally Responsive Care for Sexual Assault Survivors. Next slide, please. Great, and that wraps up our program for today. Again, a big thank you to Denver Indian Health and Family Services for presenting today, but more importantly, for sharing all of the great work that you're doing with our audience today. We truly appreciate it. And with that, we'll wrap it up. If anybody has any questions or information, you can quickly drop it in the chat and we'll try to get that information out to you. Thank you. Thanks. Bye, everybody.